Hello, and thank you for joining us here today to talk about the importance of eliminating the state's private school voucher program, also known as Boost, and redirecting $7 million in taxpayer funding back to our public schools. Before we start, I want to point out the organizations in our Public Money for Public Schools Coalition because there is a strong and broad opposition to this failed voucher program. Our coalition includes the ACLU of Maryland, Maryland Association of Boards of Education, AFT Maryland, Baltimore Teachers Union, Disability Rights Maryland, Maryland PTA, Maryland Out of School Time Network, Advocates for Children and Youth, League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and many others. Starting today, this coalition will make a strong effort to ask the House Appropriations Committee to eliminate funding for the Boost program in their budget. This afternoon, we will deliver letters to each delegate, and in the weeks ahead, members of our organizations will send emails, letters, and make phone calls to the elected representatives, urging them to redirect public money to where it is supposed to go, public schools. Here's what we'll tell them. We now have 3 core pieces of evidence to show the Boost voucher program does not help low-income students and instead takes funding away from kids in our public schools. 1, data from the first year of Boost vouchers shows that 78% of students participating in the program were already enrolled in private schools. This means that the public taxpayer money took the place of charitable giving or the private school's own scholarship funds in supporting families in affording expensive tuition. While private school operators and their allies claim to provide an escape for students stuck in so-called failing public schools, this evidence shows that they use the program to support students already in their school for every child they accepted, 4 students in their school for every child they accepted from a public school. 2, for the 22% of students who did come from public schools, we have no way of verifying if they truly have access to a better education. There is zero accountability for private schools in how they use taxpayer dollars, whether in using the high standards all public schools follow or demonstrating improved assessment scores. But if there are equal accountability for private schools, we might see what has happened in similar programs in states like Indiana, Louisiana, Ohio, Wisconsin. Students who move from public to private schools actually saw their achievement drop. As the Brookings institutions wrote when examining these results, quote, "Our historical understanding of the superior performance of private schools is no longer accurate," end quote. 3, we now know that the claim by Governor Hogan and other private school allies that the Boost program would not take away funding from public schools is a lie. In the governor's budget, he had to cut $20 million in public education funding to make room for his private school voucher program. As we all know, the budget is a zero-sum document that must be balanced. The fact is, private funding for school vouchers would not have fit in the budget if funding for public after-school programs, college readiness scholarships, and other programs designed specifically for low-income students had not been eliminated from Governor Hogan's budget. So to summarize, most students were already in private schools. The few who did move from public schools may actually have a worse education now. And all the while, our public schools have less funding for more than the 85% of Maryland kids who rely on public schools to help prepare them for a successful future. Private school vouchers haven't worked anywhere they've been tried, including in Maryland. We should eliminate Boost before it's too late. I now want to introduce the county executive from Baltimore County, Kevin Kamenetz.
Thank you. Thank you, Betty Weller, for everything you do on behalf of our public school system. A recent poll indicates that Marylanders want Governor Hogan to spend more on public school education, not less. And it's pretty clear why. Under Governor Hogan's watch, our public school system has dropped from number 1 in rankings nationally to now number 5. After being number 1 in AP testing for 10 years, we've now slipped from that top perch under Governor Hogan's watch. And we're now, in terms of the achievement gap of learning between black and white students, we are now the 8th worst in the nation. Governor Hogan's response is to promote a voucher system. We can't afford to fund 2 systems of education. This voucher-based program is really part of a national Republican effort to privatize public schools. Marylanders want public money to be invested in our public schools. We need to protect our public school system. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive Kamenetz. I would like to introduce the former head of the NAACP, Mr. Ben Jealous.
Thank you, Madam President. Look, I was thinking as I was about to walk up here, my family's been involved in fighting for fairness in our public schools here in Maryland since my mom sued Western High School for girls in 1952 so she could desegregate it in 55. And in that time, we've seen Maryland schools grow stronger and become the best in the country several years because we actually invest in serving all of our kids. This governor, too many issues already, just in the brief time since Trump has been in office, has been President Trump's silent partner. With this bold effort to redirect funds away from public schools and toward private schools, he now becomes the outspoken partner of Secretary he now becomes the outspoken partner of Betsy DeVos. I always want to mispronounce her name. Hogan needs to take a step back and listen to the people in this state who have been very clear that we intend to lead this country not just in total outcomes, but in fairness and in actually drawing our children closer together in their performance. This simply makes our system less fair, and it hurts our kids. And I would pray that the governor would back up and, again, stop being the silent partner of President Trump. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Next up is Tashawn Wiseria from the ACLU of Maryland. I'm sorry, we're Asoria.
Thank you, Ms. Betty, and thank you to all the organizations and leaders that stand with us in this belief that public dollars should be used for public schools. Out of the 176 private schools that have received this public fund, at least 172 identify with a specific religion. That's 97%. 97% of schools that benefit from this taxpayer subsidy are religious. This is the cause for our great concern, because using taxpayer dollars, This is a cause for our great concern, because using taxpayer dollars to fund religious institutions only entangles state governments with religious teachings. Troubling religious teachings have also been found in schools that are receiving public funds from this program. One of these private schools, its handbook cites that this school supports and encourages the teachings and cultivation of biblical values and lifestyles. Another private school that receives taxpayer dollars from this program cites in their 5th grade curriculum that they will teach students to be able to describe God's plan for human sexual behavior. And let me be clear, the ACLU defends religious liberties, and it's not in our interest in changing the teachings of these religious schools. If these schools desire to instruct these religious teachings and parents want to send their kids to these schools, that's perfectly okay. But what our concern is that when you send public funds to these schools, that just further entangles that concept of religious or separation from religious institutions and teachings. Additionally, private schools that benefit from them from this program do not have an up-to-par anti-discrimination policy. And this is one thing that is another concern for us. And actually, today, in Ways and Means and JPR, we're going to be hearing Delegate Corey McCrae's and Senator Kagan's bill to actually address this. And for these reasons, the ACO of Maryland, along with the partners standing beside us, we implore and encourage our state legislators to eliminate this program and send these much-needed funds back to public schools. Thank you.
Thank you to Sean. We'll now turn it over to Kenya Campbell from AFT Maryland and the Baltimore Teachers Union.
Thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to offer a few brief remarks on behalf of AFT Maryland and the Baltimore Teachers Union. We are opposed to the funding of Boost and any other voucher program the governor and the General Assembly puts forth. Clearly, there's a need for greater, not less, state funding to public schools. No matter what Governor Hogan and his supporters say about this bill, funds that are not being applied towards public education are not helping to provide a 21st century education for our children. Baltimore City schools are already fighting an uphill battle after Governor Hogan's budget included a $42 million cut to education funding, leaving AFT Maryland, the BTU, and local elected officials trying to find ways to keep our teachers and paraprofessionals in the classroom so that our children can receive the best education our city and state can provide. The Kirwan Commission is studying a report that estimates that the General Assembly would need to increase spending by hundreds of millions of dollars in order to fully fund education across the state. Maryland is the richest state in the nation. However, so many of our state's public schools need so much. A quality world education is a civil right for every child, not just a few for whom school choice is a privilege. We appreciate our non-public schools. We respect them. But we will not allow this governor and the General Assembly to throw public money to private schools when public schools are in such dire need.
Thank you, Kenya. I'm now going to turn it over to County Executive from Prince George's County, Rashern Baker.
Right on time.
Right on time.
Listen, thank you. I am glad to be standing here with our colleagues and talking about how this is wrong of the governor to divert funds from our public education to private. You know, I've just come from Prince George's County where we're actually doing our budget. And, you know, every year we put more and more of our funding into our public education because every year under this governor we've seen cuts. And this year is another example. If Maryland's going to be #1 in education again, it requires the state to fully commit it. And by fully committing to public education, that means every dollar. You know, the budget in the state, because I served on appropriation, I can tell you this, the budget in the state is not like you get different money from other places. It's one pot. And you determine what your priorities are by how you use that pot of money. By diverting this money and putting more into private school vouchers, the governor is sending a message that he doesn't believe in public education, that he's not willing to invest in every child everywhere in this state. For us in Prince George's County, we invested. That's why you see this year the highest graduation rate that we've ever had. We've invested, so we've seen a 7% increase in our graduation rates. We've invested, and so we've seen our middle school where kids were dropping out are now retaining and going on to high school. But that's because the citizens of Prince George's County and this government invested in public education. We want the state to do the same. We want the state to go back to where it used to be, where they committed to a strong public education. That's why I'm glad here to stand here with my colleagues who also understand that. We want the message to go loud and clear to the governor. This is not how we fund our public education. The state has two requirements. It is to pass a budget, and it's to deal with public education. Those are the two requirements the state has. We want the governor to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive Baker. And finally, our last speaker, last but not least, and a great advocate for our public schools is the president of the Maryland PTA, Elizabeth Light.
Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Isla Light, and I'm the president of Maryland PTA, where we strongly oppose Boost and vouchers. It's important for parents to know that their tax dollars are going to be well spent. And while I appreciate protect our schools, it's very important that we remember that it also should be protect our families as well, because there is a trickle-down effect. Whenever the schools are not able to provide certain minimal services and supplies, guess who they call? They contact the parents. We're going to need tennis balls because our chairs in the classroom are uneven, so tennis balls will help to steady them. We're going to need fundraising for supplies. We're going to need copy paper, computer paper. On those very important back-to-school lists, guess what? We have 3 reams of computer paper on the list for kindergartners. I'm not sure exactly what they use them for, but these are the type of trickle-down expenses that families, many who earn minimum wage, are asked to bring forward. We are, in fact, shuffling those tax dollars to an entity that is discriminating in some case against children who have special needs, and limiting the amount of funds that should be going to our public school students in our public schools. So Maryland PTA and our 170,000 members across the state support the idea that public funds should go only to public schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And with that, our press conference comes to a close. I want to thank you all, and thanks to all the public education advocates who joined us here today to urge our representatives in Annapolis to protect our public schools. We will now be available for follow-up questions on an individual basis. Thank you. Thanks.